Welcome back. Truth Be Told, 2026 Black History Month, Episode 3, A Woman on Fire. Thanks for joining us. My father took me to my first air show when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And ever since then, I've been absolutely amazed with aviation. It's 1862 in rural northeast Texas, a little town called Atlanta. And George and Susan Coleman have a beautiful brown baby girl they name Elizabeth. Bessie. Bessie's a country girl, being the daughter of sharecroppers. And she grows up in a huge and loving family. She is the 10th of 13 children. And she enjoys all of the love and support that a big family can offer. She finishes her primary education and goes on to enroll in what is now Langston University, which is in Oklahoma. But because of finances, she has to return home to work as a domestic. That's not going to work for Bessie, so with the support of her parents, she decides to, as part of the Great Migration, move north in search of better opportunities. Industry and commerce in the northern part of the United States provided for many African Americans leaving the South the promise of a better life. She said to her mother, "I am going to make something of myself." She's in Chicago now with her brothers who are already living there, a city girl, under the watchful eyes of her brothers. Now a young woman, she enrolls herself in cosmetology school to learn manicuring. A working woman, she secures employment at a barbershop, the White Sox Barbershop. That's the name of it. And she is the manicurist on duty, a working woman. Now, barbershops have changed over the years. You very rarely, if ever, see a manicurist in a barbershop these days, although it was common back then. But more than that, the barbershop was the center of the neighborhood, in a sense. There was always the guy who knew everything. There was always the guy who could get anything. Any number of neighborhood dignitaries might come through. And there's also a number of philosophers and know-it-alls of every sort. That was the barbershop. White Sox Barbershop was no different. You had men who had served in World War I that would come in and talk about their experiences. One of the things that Bessie overheard more than anything else were their stories about the airplane. She can't help but think, maybe I can fly. She couldn't get it out of her mind. She had a conversation with her brother, who himself was a World War I veteran, and he told her there is no way you are going to be able to learn how to fly. A woman, and a black woman on top of that. But she is now an inquisitive woman, and she begins to research about flying and flying schools. And she just started to apply. She applied to every flying school she could find. She was rejected by everyone. Bessie made some powerful friends. And this is a good time to put in this public service announcement to our youth and young adults. Always put your best foot forward. You never know who you're speaking to. You never know who you may meet. So always be on your best. Bessie, during the course of her employment, met this gentleman. His name is Robert Abbott. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Chicago Defender, the largest African American newspaper in America, or one of. The Chicago Defender is part of the reason why the Great Migration occurred, as it reported stories of the industrial North to African Americans still living in the Jim Crow South. The Chicago Defender was so good at reporting that at one point in some parts of the South, the Chicago Defender was prohibited because employers in the Jim Crow South knew that blacks were learning of better opportunities in the North, and they wanted to stop the flow of that information. But we are and always have been a resourceful people. So because at the railway stations and platforms, the sheriff or the police might be on the lookout for the Chicago Defender in order to intercept it, the Pullman railcar porters, America's first black professionals, stepped in and became the mailmen of the day. And they would, at a prearranged location, simply throw a bundle of the newspapers off the train for perhaps Reverend Smith to pick up, and then he would make them available after Sunday morning services. She also met this man, Jesse Benga. Jesse Benga is a banker. Mr. Abbott, hearing about both her desire for flight training and her rejection by all the schools, gives her some words of wisdom. He says, "Bessie, you're going to have to leave the U.S. to be trained." But more than that, he wrote an article in his paper letting his readers know about this wonderful young lady, and donations started to pour in on her behalf. Bessie began applying for flying schools in Europe. She's determined, and she was accepted by a school in Paris, France, one of the most prestigious schools in Paris, France, the Cauldron Brothers. She is now a woman on fire, and her plan is simple: work 2 jobs and save enough money to relocate to France and go to night school to learn French, which is exactly what she did. When the day arrived for her to pull up stakes, settle her debts, and move to France, it was November 20th, 1920. She boarded the USS Impersonator, waved goodbye to her brothers and a few friends. That was the largest steamship of its day. She headed off to France for flying school, where she learned how to fly the Newport Type 2 biplane seen here. Bessie was a diligent student and excelled at her studies, so much so that Bessie finished the 10-month flying program in 7 months. She was that motivated and that dedicated. And she received her international pilot's license on June 15th, 1921. And that is the day that Bessie Coleman became the first, not black, not woman, but the first American to receive an international pilot's license. Oh yeah, and by the way, the first woman and the first black American to do so as well. That meant she could go anywhere in the world and fly with that license. You might also notice top right hand corner, she was invited to and joined one of Paris's elite aviation societies. Bessie actually went to Europe twice. The first time was to get her pilot's license. She went back to further hone her skills in order to be a great stunt pilot. When she left and came back the first time, very few people noticed. But on her second return, after she had received worldwide acclaim in Germany, France, Denmark, and other places, the whole community was there to welcome her home. Bessie is now doing what she loves to do. Here you see an advertisement, Aviatrix Bessie Coleman here soon. She performed for crowds everywhere. She was loved by everyone who saw her. She was a wonderful sport pilot and very much sought after for barnstorming events and the like. She was also a no-nonsense woman. Bessie Coleman would not perform for a segregated crowd. In fact, in one instance, when she found out that the crowd where she was going to perform above was segregated, she walked into the airport manager's office. She sat down. She told him there would be no show as long as the spectators were segregated. The airport manager called her bluff, but only for a few minutes. Realizing that she was serious, the crowd was desegregated and the show went on. Bessie would also find out where the African American soldiers who served in World War I were, and she would have as many of them as possible brought out to the event so that they could be recognized before her show. She knew that a lot of them had come home to little to no fanfare at all. Remember, this is the same little girl who told her mother, "I'm going to make something of myself." Along with her other accomplishments, Bessie Coleman started a flying school for African Americans. This would be part of her legacy. This video is in no way long enough to showcase all of her fame and acclaim. Bessie Coleman was known all around the world. These two newspaper clippings, one advertising her participation in an air race, it says she was the only female participant. The other one is a highlight about her return from Europe, which says she went overseas as a manicurist and came back to give exhibition flights. Elizabeth Bessie Coleman, short in her shoes but a giant in her day and a legend in her time. Bessie once said, "Don't ever tell me what I cannot do." She said of all of her flights, the two most memorable were when she flew over her own hometown of Atlanta, Texas, and when she flew over Houston on Juneteenth. Bessie was quoted as saying, "The sky is where I love to be, for there is no prejudice in the sky." And beloved, on April 30th, 1926, death took her away from us in a tragic accident. Funeral services were held for her in many places. The two largest were Orlando, Florida, and Chicago, Illinois. In Chicago, Illinois, over 10,000 mourners attended her funeral services, and the service itself was presided over by civil rights activist Ida B. Wells. But death would be too late, for she had already cemented herself into the history of this country and her people. And she had already established a legacy of determination and of excellence that lives to this very day. So when I think about Dr. Mae Jemison, NASA astronaut, the first black woman to leave this atmosphere and fly into space. When I think about Captain Venice Armour, Marine Corps attack helicopter pilot, the first. When I think about Colonel Merrill Tisdale, the first and only Air Force U-2 pilot. When you fly to Florida, you fly at 30,000 feet. Colonel Tisdale, when she goes to work, she flies at 90,000 feet. When I think about Captain LaShawna Holmes, the first black woman Coast Guard pilot. When I think about Lieutenant Colonel Kimbrough, Air Force fighter pilot, that's Top Gun stuff, y'all. When I think about Lieutenant Madeline Swingle, Navy fighter pilot, that's Top Gun stuff. We can all be proud of these women and what they've accomplished. And can I just say about my black sisters, I don't care how dangerous, I don't care how treacherous the job is, a black woman gonna look good doing it. We can all be proud of these black women who have forged new paths because of what Bessie did. And they stand on her shoulders. They stand on the shoulders of Elizabeth Bessie Coleman, a woman on fire. Now I'm a student of the school of thought that says most of the good things to say have already been said. So I'll just leave you with a quote from a very well-renowned speaker. His name is Les Brown. If you want something bad enough to go out and fight for it, to work day and night for it, to give up your time, your peace, and your sleep for it, if all that you dream and scheme is about it, and life seems useless and worthless without it, if you gladly sweat for it and fret for it and plan for it and lose all of your terror of the opposition for it, if you simply go after that thing that you want with all of your capacity, strength, and sagacity, faith, hope, and confidence, and stern pertinacity, if neither cold, nor famine, nor poverty, nor gout, nor sickness, nor pain of body and brain can keep you away from that thing that you want, if dogged and grim you besiege and beset it, then with the help of God, I believe you will get it. She was known as Brave Bess. She was known as Queen Bess. I call her the original Queen Bee.
If you would like to see more videos like this, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification icon to receive our new releases. If you would like to assist Truth Be Told in our mission to preserve African American history, which is American history, please share this video with your children, family, and friends. Truth Be Told, you can find Black history anywhere because our history is everywhere.